Fake messaging, failed strategy. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Every American hearing Democrats prattle on about how illegal immigrants are cherished members of our community and about how we have to do more to protect their rights, they need to watch the remarks of the mother of Rachel Morin, who came to the White House briefing room today to share what happened to her 37-year-old daughter at the hands of an illegal alien from El Salvador.
There's a 6-inch square in the back of her head where the skull is shattered the way that you would crush an eggshell in pieces. 3/4 of her brain hemorrhaged. Her right and left side of her face bashed in. Her beautiful face bashed in. Her head bashed in. Broken bones, fractures. He takes and he drags her some more. There wasn't 1 inch of her body that didn't have some kind of injury. She had a fractured rib, fractured nose, fractured skull, and then he takes her into the tunnel and he picks her up. He throws her against the wall. Blood is gushing from her head. Her hair is soaked in blood. And they showed us pictures of her body against the wall, outlined. The blood outlined her body. And you could see where the blood ran down around her as he was raping her.
If you weren't moved by that, and all of you who are parents or grandparents out there, imagine that pain. Over the past, 20 years or so, we've had a heated debate in this country about immigration, both legal and illegal. And the question really has been, should the government, our government, focus on helping Americans struggling in a globalized economy and helping keep them safe, or should it do more to cater to the open borders radicals and the ultra-wealthy who think we can never have enough migrant labor? Americans in the last election chose Trump's path, America first, with a real deportation force. But the Democrats, they're digging their heels in. Remember, once upon a time, they actually believed in borders. But now, well, they're doing everything in their power to keep as many illegals here as possible. And we're seeing their grand strategy play out, one that they hope will turn one of the most powerful issues for Trump, which is immigration, against both him and his party. Now, this left-wing effort is well-organized and it's well-funded. And it's carried out by a myriad Democrat officials and their allies across politics, nonprofits, law firms, and, yes, the media. First, it starts with the narrative building, the storytelling, the messaging. Now, the backdrop here is that Trump literally told voters he was going to deport as many illegals as possible. And he won on that platform. But now everything his administration does to fulfill that promise gets the most damning spin. Remember, illegals are never simply taken into custody.
He was effectively disappeared to a foreign country.
A man who's charged with no crime, convicted of no crime, and who was illegally abducted.
U.S. citizens and immigrants alike are being disappeared off the street by men in vans with no uniform.
ICE personnel are never enforcement officials carrying out lawful deportation orders.
It's almost Gestapo-like when you see folks coming up in masks and just grabbing people off the streets and throwing them in a van.
These Gestapo tactics aren't happening in a foreign country, not in a bygone era. They are happening right here in the United States today.
And of course, dictators, being dictators, they don't care about creating a national crisis.
Right now, Donald Trump is defying a unanimous order by the Supreme Court to bring Kilmore back home. And I think that in of itself is a constitutional crisis.
We're approaching the point where the judge, if he wants to move forward with this contempt, is going to have a hard time even enforcing it. It makes for a real crisis.
It is a constitutional crisis because the administration is under a court order to return this wrongfully deported man.
this wrongfully deported man. Now, this is all part of the messaging to program. It's real programming a dutiful press. And then, of course, to affect public opinion and move the polls so that eventually they can reopen the border. And then we can get the massive flow of humanity into the United States going again. That is their ultimate goal here. But remember, none of this narrative building, none of it, would be possible without an array of well-funded lawyers and nonprofit allies. And they raise millions, and I'm talking tens of millions of dollars, from open border zealots and others dependent on illegal labor. These organizations include groups like United We Dream, Immigrant Legal Resource Center, and the National Immigration Project. And they're ready to rush to any camera or any court to help illegals get benefits, get protection from deportation, and even to file plaintiff's actions, if you can believe it. The group CASA and CASA Legal, that's one of the biggest and most active pro-illegal immigrant groups out there. Their website outlines its mission this way: we will organize, 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 and resist. We will stand united in fighting against the harmful policies that threaten to burden working families for the next 4 years. They raised more than $21 million last year alone, 63% from foundations, and believe it or not, from government grants. Yes, I looked at their financials. And by the way, that money goes to pay the salary of lawyers like this.
The government has made all sorts of wild allegations about Kilmer being a member of MS-13. There has been not a single piece of evidence that has been filed in court.
And oh, yeah, well, we're going to get into that in a moment. And along with the well-choreographed messaging and the assistance from big legal, the immigration crusaders also create the veneer of popular support through rallies and online petitions. And they're about as organic as using Roundup on your weeds.
A father, a son, a brother who has dedicated himself to make our family's American dream reality.
Okay. Well, we know what she really thinks, because a few years back, the wife of that individual was actually petitioning the court for a protective order. She's kind of changed her mind on that now, saying she was a victim of domestic abuse and she just wanted to be on the safe side. But look, these people aren't just, what you have to understand about this, they're not just arguing for this individual to be returned to the United States. They're arguing for benefits. They're arguing for in-state tuition. They're arguing for, all sorts of benefits and other things that American citizens get. That's what all these groups end up doing. And when they do that, the goal is what? To convince you that illegal aliens are just the same as American citizens. They deserve all the rights. Look, they want them to vote. But back to the media. Most of the press hasn't dwelled on the inconvenient facts here, whether it's that the wife of this individual actually, essentially was accusing him of perhaps domestic abuse, or that MS-13 was obviously the individual in El Salvador was a member of. They don't want to tackle those inconvenient facts because that doesn't go with their narrative. So the process of setting this all up as a national concern has 3 steps, and the groups involved are the usual suspects. We're always going to follow the money because the money talks. But J.D. Vance sums this situation up perfectly, saying when the media and the far left obsess over an MS-13 gang member and demand that he be returned to the United States for a 3rd deportation hearing, what they're really saying is they want the vast majority of illegal aliens to stay here permanently. That is the truth, and that is the angle.
There's been an attempted prison break. A Democrat senator arrived at a mega prison in El Salvador ready to free a Maryland dad. But we're just finding out he's not really a Maryland dad. Homeland Security says he's a verified member of MS-13 and he's been accused of beating his wife twice. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen was up at the crack of dawn to rescue this guy from a Central American prison.
I'm here at the airport. I'm about to board my flight for San Salvador. The goal of this mission is to let the Trump administration, to let the government of El Salvador know that we are going to keep fighting to bring Abrego Garcia home until he returns to his family. I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. I'm now en route into the city. Looking forward to meeting with the team from the American Embassy. The goal of my visit is to talk to people here about the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I also hope to have the chance to meet with him.
Once Van Hollen caravaned down to the mega prison, he made an announcement. He's not leaving until he frees MS-13.
Why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CCOT? Why not release Abrego Garcia today? I'm not asking him to smuggle Mr. Abrego Garcia into the United States. I'm simply asking him to open the door of CCOT and let this innocent man walk out.
The distinguished senator from Maryland flew 3,000 miles on a rescue mission to free an illegal alien gangbanger from a mega prison and bring him home to Maryland, even though his home's in El Salvador. And the president of El Salvador said, would you like a tour of the mega prison instead?
I'm not interested at this moment in taking a tour of CCOT. I just want to meet with Mr. Abrego Garcia. He said he was not able to make that happen. I asked him if I came back next week, whether I'd be able to see Mr. Abrego Garcia. He said he couldn't promise that either. So I asked him if I could get on the phone, either video phone or just a phone, and talk to Mr. Abrego Garcia. He said he could not arrange that.
The president of El Salvador just told a U.S. senator, don't waste my time, gringo. Van Hollen's flying to foreign countries to call illegal aliens, but he never called the mom whose daughter was killed by one in his own state. All this over a fake Maryland dad. But what about the real Maryland mom, Rachel Morin, who was raped and murdered by an illegal in the same gang? Rachel Morin's mom was at today's White House press briefing. Watch.
To have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this.
Van Hollen never spoke to Rachel Morin's mom, his own constituent. But Trump has, and he did again today in the Oval.
Beautiful.
A dear friend.
She's a beautiful woman. She's been through hell. She's been through hell, right?
Oh, yes.
Your daughter's looking down proud of you. You know that. Just keep it going.
I know.
Keep it going.
It's like you said.
Stay with that one.
It's like you said, we have a purpose.
It's a purpose. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
She's proud of you.
Van Hollen disgraced himself today, but Democrats are lining up to do the same thing, booking trips to El Salvador so fast they're crashing Expedia.com. Cory Booker wants to go there too. Maybe Spartacus can talk his way into the prison. One House Democrat told Axios, quote, I just came from a roundtable with 2 Dem activist groups, and all they wanted to talk about was El Salvador. One smart Democrat said this, Trump's setting a trap for us, and like usual, we're falling for it. Today, we learn more about Democrats' innocent Maryland dad. He crossed the border illegally through the Texas desert, migrated to Maryland, got pulled over 4 times there, and was never deported because it's a sanctuary state. And he skipped every traffic court hearing. Garcia in 2019 was arrested in a gang sweep. He was detained in connection to a murder investigation and was picked up in a frequent gang area. According to the police report, the detective picked him up with 3 active members of MS-13, one of them ranking members. Garcia tossed marijuana out of his pocket when the detective approached, and when he was frisked, Garcia had $1,000 in cash. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat, which the detective says means they're members in good standing with MS-13. He was also wearing a hoodie with a known gang insignia. Officers contacted a reliable informant who confirmed that Garcia was an active member of MS-13 with the Westerns clique. The source said he had the rank of Chiqueo with the moniker of Chele. Now, how do we know he just didn't randomly run into these guys? Quote, officers know MS-13 gang members are only allowed to hang around with other members or prospects for the gang. Is this your average Maryland father?
There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again.
When he was brought in by the police, he admitted he was in the country illegally. He was interrogated about human drug smuggling. At first, he said he wasn't afraid of being sent home, and then he changed the story and said he was terrified. A Democrat judge held him, denied him bond because they said he was a flight risk and a danger to the community, and ruled that he was deportable. While he was in jail, he married the American woman he'd gotten pregnant and then appealed for asylum. On appeal, another Democrat judge upheld that he was a verified member of MS-13. But since his lawyer argued that his life was in danger from a rival gang if he was deported to El Salvador, the judge said he could be deported anywhere in the world except for El Salvador, then released him. But Biden failed to deport him, which is too bad for Garcia's wife because of what happened next. Garcia's wife in 2020 accused him of domestic violence, and a temporary protective order was issued by the judge. But the wife never followed up and appeared at the hearing. The next year, in 2021, she accused him of domestic violence again, and a judge issued a second protective order. This is what she told authorities. He punched, scratched me on my left eye, leaving me bleeding. He ripped my shorts and shirt off. He grabbed me by my arm. I was afraid to be close to him. I have multiple photos, videos of how violent he could be, and all the bruises that he left me. But again, she didn't appear at a follow-up hearing. This is the man who Democrats are defending.
The court ordered that the respondent committed the following acts of abuse. Once in May of 2021, assault in any degree. And on May 4th of 2021, he punched and scratched his wife, ripped off her shirt, and grabbed and bruised her. This is from a court in Maryland. So not only are Democrats rushing to defend an illegal criminal foreign terrorist gang member, but also an apparent woman beater.
After being arrested with drugs, cash, and gang attire during a gang sweep of known gang members as a part of a murder investigation, and being questioned in relation to drug and human trafficking, and being accused of domestic violence twice with video evidence, Democrats have made Kilmar Garcia their handpicked poster child, an innocent victim of Trump's mass deportations. They couldn't have picked a worse guy if they tried. This is the Maryland dad, a Maryland senator, flew to El Salvador to rescue from prison. When Donald Trump was sworn into office, he designated MS-13 a terrorist organization. And terrorists aren't bound by deportation restrictions, meaning the judge's restrictions on deporting Garcia to his home country of El Salvador vacated. So ICE picked Garcia up, put him on a plane, and sent him home. Now, Garcia's lawyers are arguing the Trump administration should have reopened his immigration case in Maryland, petitioned the judge to lift the El Salvador restriction order, which the judge would have done because he's now a designated terrorist, and then fly him back to El Salvador. They're arguing over clerical issues, paperwork. The Trump administration is arguing this is a national security situation. If every MS-13 member goes through their own hearing, we'll never get these guys out of here. That's the argument. This is just common sense. Pick them up and send them home.
Allow me to introduce you to the new face of hypocrisy, hysteria, feigned moral outrage inside the Democratic Party. That would be Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. Now, when Joe Biden allowed an estimated, 12+ million unvetted illegal immigrants to pour into our country, including known terrorists, murderers, rapists, cartel members, gang members, Van Hollen did nothing and he said nothing. When Maryland, a mother of 5, Rachel Morin, was raped brutally, murdered brutally by an illegal immigrant from El Salvador on a Maryland hiking trail, Van Hollen could only be bothered to release a short written statement to a news outlet. When 20-year-old Maryland woman Kayla Hamilton was raped and murdered in her own Maryland home by another illegal immigrant from El Salvador, Chris Van Hollen expressed zero public outrage. But now that a citizen from El Salvador, not Maryland, who entered our country illegally and was accused of assaulting his own wife and accused of our own federal government under 2 administrations of violent gang activity, now that this illegal immigrant has been deported back to his home, all of a sudden, Chris Van Hollen is all up in arms. He has found his voice. He is outraged. In the past 48 hours, Van Hollen has rushed in front of every microphone, every camera he could find, giving one impassioned plea after another, vowing to rescue and bring back to America this illegal immigrant that got deported. And today, Chris Van Hollen flew to El Salvador for the dumbest, most pointless political stunt in recent history. We'll let you decide. Take a look.
I'm here at the airport. I'm about to board my flight for San Salvador. The goal of this mission is to let the Trump administration, to let the government of El Salvador know that we are going to keep fighting to bring Abrego Garcia home.
I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. As I've said before, the goal of my visit is to talk to people here about the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And I won't stop trying, and I can assure the president, the vice president, that I may be the first United States senator to visit El Salvador on this issue, but there will be more, and there will be more members of Congress coming.
I tend to doubt it, but by the way, if he is successful, maybe he can invite him to live with him. It's no surprise Van Hollen left empty-handed. He couldn't even get a phone call with this illegal immigrant, much less secure his release from an El Salvador jail. But Chris Van Hollen is still vowing to, quote, bring him home. Good luck with that. Now, Chris, he is home. He is not a Maryland man like you and every other Democrat and everyone in the state-run legacy media mob is claiming. He's not an American. He's not your constituent. He was not in our country legally, according to a report, John Solomon. He even admitted to police that he entered our country illegally. In other words, you're a lawmaker, right? Didn't follow our laws, didn't respect our borders or our sovereignty. He had no right to be here. And you know who should still be here, safe and sound, in your state of Maryland? That would be Kayla Hamilton and Rachel Morin. But you didn't lift a finger for Rachel or her family or anyone in your state or anyone in this country to protect them from the likes of those illegals that murdered them or are involved with them. And Chris Van Hollen, well, couldn't be bothered with their safety and security. To be honest, he's barely said anything at all about these 2 victims of illegal immigration. He might not even know who they are. Chris Van Hollen is a disgrace to the entire state of Maryland. Frankly, to the entire country. You know, this performative art is just a joke. He's lying. He's grandstanding. It's frankly repulsive. He should be ashamed of himself. Better yet, maybe he should take some time and listen to Rachel Morin's mother and reevaluate his entire political career. Here's what she said on our show last night. Take a look. Did you ever get a call from Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Alejandro Mayorkas or your Senator Van Hollen, who made a big deal about he's going to go to El Salvador and bring home this one illegal from El Salvador who Democrats are saying had no business being sent back to his home country? Did they ever call you? And what are your thoughts on your senator going to bat for this illegal But did he ever say anything to you and your family about your loss? To ever call you, ever take the time to be with you?
No, actually, I'm very angry. I'm actually outraged, but I'm too sad at the moment to show anger at the same time. He did not call our family. He did not give condolences. There was no action on the Democratic Party in any way, from Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mayorkas, anyone here in Maryland, none of the senators did anything to help search for the murderer of my daughter.
Now, in case the senator did miss our show, only hours ago, Patty Morin had this to say at the White House briefing with Caroline Leavitt, and Caroline will also join us later in the show. Take a look.
Why are we not protecting the American citizens? It's just common sense. Why are we not protecting our children? And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this.
I've said it before. I will say it again. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mayorkas, and everybody that stood by silently and didn't lift a finger to secure our border, as far as I'm concerned, they all have blood on their hands. And by the way, they did not have the courage to even call these families, Lake and Riley's family. They didn't have the courage to call Jocelyn Ungary's family, or, you know, in this case, Rachel Morin's mother. Why not? And why didn't they speak out about Biden's open borders? Why didn't they seem to have even the slightest interest in honoring Rachel Morin or any of the other victims of illegal immigration? Senator Van Hollen needs to sit down or shut up, or maybe he could just stay in El Salvador. To be honest, Van Hollen should be thanking President Trump for doing something he himself never had the courage to do, protecting the people, the moms and dads, the sons and daughters of children in Maryland, and deporting illegal immigrants who never should be in our country at all. If they want to come in our country, come in legally.
Good. Yes. Okay, good. An audience with hands. Happy Wednesday, everyone. In Chicago last night, former President Biden gave his first speech since leaving office. As a result, millions of Americans now believe in life after death. He was speaking to a group of advocates for the disabled who were surprised to learn the keynote speaker was one of their clients. During his speech, he referred to black children as colored kids, which I heard was an improvement over his first draft. You know, but what's nice, after the speech, he was greeted by a throng of well-wishers. According to a new poll, California voters are not excited about Kamala Harris running for governor. To improve her support among Hispanics, she's been working with a consultant. The world's first sperm race, in which human sperm cells will compete on a microscopic track, will take place in Los Angeles. Yeah, the winner goes home on this sock. Looks familiar, huh, Joe? The UK's top court ruled that so-called trans women do not fit the legal definition of woman. This from a legal system full of men that wear wigs. At least they can pass. New York AG Letitia James is under investigation for falsifying records to get loans. Funny, isn't this exactly the thing she tried to prosecute Trump for? Makes me wonder, What if she banged Stormy Daniels? On one loan, Letitia reportedly listed her father as her husband. Hey, lady, stay in your lane, said one woman. Finally, California is proposing a new bill that allows homeless college kids to sleep in their cars on campus. I highly recommend it, said one man. Homeless Don. All right, so apparently this entire week has been about one guy. You know, the Maryland dad with 3 kids, who also happens to be an illegal, likely a gang member and perhaps a domestic abuser. His name, don't know, don't care. All right, I got a family, a new baby, a dog, a job, a neighborhood plagued by violent creeps. I don't need this. Here's what I do know. He's here illegally, and like Joe Biden after a 3-bean burrito, he has to go. But faced with an adult solution to a real problem, the media yet again creates an imaginary concern from the same playbook that they always use. You worry about voter fraud, they say voter ID is racist. You worry about government fraud and abuse, they claim DOJ is cutting Social Security. You worry about crime, they claim all cops are racist. You worry about medical monsters experimenting on children, they claim trans kids are killing themselves. Once you see this grift, you can't unsee it. When we try to solve a real problem, they create the imaginary concern to manipulate public opinion. But this time, it's not working. Overwhelmingly, the American public favored deportations of illegals, no matter what bull you conjure up. So kids or not, he's illegal, he goes. And here's why. Let's go all the way back to a few months ago. Remember those migrants coming in by the millions? Migrants who we had no intel on, who we didn't vet, didn't investigate, who we identified only enough to write checks to? We knew less about those young men than the ones I meet at truck stops. Planes arriving in the middle of the night. New programs created by executive order, supposedly by a guy who couldn't find his way off the stage without a zip line. And all it took to get refugee status was saying, I hate tortillas. But now it's time for them to leave. Suddenly, we're all social workers. Oh, he has kids. He works so hard. Well, pal, maybe don't pick a country. You're illegally in to start a family. It sounds harsh, not when it's compared to the arrogant indifference of Democrats when women got raped and murdered by illegals that they let in. Not to mention the relentless violence in cities they ignored for years because it was under their watch. And now a couple of Democrat congressmen say they want to fly to El Salvador to retrieve this scum, who is an El Salvador citizen, by the way, not an American one. Cory Booker wants to visit the prisoners in El Salvador. And that makes sense. It's the only place where people can't get up and leave when he starts yapping. But do the Dems realize they have no authority in El Salvador? El Salvador is a little different than the green room at The View. For one, the tattoos on The View were branded by farmers. Yeah. Okay. They're used to it.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
But really, the Maryland dad is just the latest awful prop for the latest awful narrative, a diversion to make you forget what the Biden regime chose to import with the media cheering them on. The crime, the fentanyl, the overwhelmed schools, the raped and murdered women. Joe did a killer job, and by that, I mean he actually got people killed. The media wants us crying over this dude. Sorry, I'm saving my outrage for the Americans that Biden, Harris, and Mayorkas burdened, hurt, and betrayed. And yet the press is losing it like someone just said Brian Stelter farted. The mainstream media has run more stories on this jackass than they did on the victims of the crime wave created by the open border they created. Look, it's simple. Deportation is the corrective to importation. When they came in, our terrible leaders didn't ask questions. Instead, they cared more about border agents getting whipped or whipping migrants. So now, when it's time to go, I'm not wasting mental shelf space on their concerns. Oh, but we're not sure he's MS-13. That sounds like a lot of the guys Kat used to date. But I repeat, I don't care. And don't get me started on, but isn't there a process? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's called hit the road. You can argue the legal all you want. Have at it, Clarence Darrow, whatever his name is. But all of that is downstream from the initial massive injustice, a Democrat government that deliberately flooded the country with illegals. If they didn't create this mess, we wouldn't have to clean it up. It's that simple. If you want to argue the legal implications, call 1-800-I-DON'T-GIVE-A. Let's welcome tonight's guest. When he calls the suicide hotline, they let it go to voicemail. Comedian Joe Mackey. He punctures left-wing fibs and runs circles around libs. Former Trump advisor Steve Cortez. She's got it all. Looks, brains, and both kidneys. The Federalist correspondent Brianna Lyman. And like shuffleboard, women love to do him on cruise ships. New York Times bestselling author, comedian, and former NWA world champion Tyrus. Joe, you look great. You look like the hip reverend at a school for wayward kids. Yeah. Are you on your cover tonight?
No, Greg. I have a meeting on a yacht.
Oh, really?
I will say due process is important, but it's also important for the plaintiffs. Mm-hmm. Now, here's a person that came to the country in 2011, spent 14 years and multiple children later. Mm. He's still here. That reminds me of college. But I'll say this. Look, Trump did screw up here. This was, they deported him to the one country he couldn't be deported to. They should send him somewhere worse, like France. But whenever you make a mistake, no matter how minor, you should try to fix it. Like one time, I damaged my brother's car, but I made sure that my dad paid for it.
Well done, Joe. A lot of lessons in that response. Steve, I have a real problem with the concern over one illegal alien somehow taking preference over the indifference that they shared for actual citizens.
Right. Can I ask you first, though, from your monologue, who hates tortillas?
That's my point.
I mean, as the lone Latino here, the token Latino, for the ensemble.
But you know, that was how easy it was to claim asylum.
Right. Of course, right? Any ridiculous lie coached by American NGOs. Look, this guy is an absolute scumbag, right? And we know that because he beats women. If you beat women, you're a scumbag. But here's the point, too, Greg. It wouldn't matter if he were a wonderful person. He still trespassed. He still broke and entered into our homeland and was here illegally. So I don't care if he was Ward Cleaver, if he was that good of a husband and father, he has to go.
Mm-hmm. Do we remember Ward Cleaver, right? That's for all of our viewers over 90. The great late Hugh Beaumont.
Yep.
It's sad that I know that name. He was a great dad, though.
Amazing.
He really was. Brianna, you have no idea.
I have no idea who these people are.
It's okay. If it wasn't on Good Times, I didn't watch either.
Why is it that when the Democrats are presented two choices, they always pick the wrong one? They always side with the bad guy and then try to convince everybody, no, actually, they're misunderstood. Why don't you just go with your gut and you go like, I know this guy's bad?
Because why would they have to? They have the weight of the propaganda press behind them. This guy's apparently a Maryland father. You would never glean from these headlines that he was here legally, should have been deported in 2018, and apparently beat his wife. But they do that on purpose. They want to blur the line between an illegal alien and a citizen to delegitimize these efforts to get rid of all the illegal aliens.
Yeah, it's amazing, though, that it's all because of Trump. They have to pick they'll always pick the worst person because at least it's not Trump. I love, Tyrus, that this guy Van Halen, what's his name, Van Hollen? He's no Van Halen.
No.
He's not even
Sammy
Crocus.
Hagar Van Halen.
Yes, he's Sam. I was going to say the guy from Extreme. was in
Even worse Van Halen.
Yes.
Gary Chacon did an admirable job.
Thank you. By the way, you're right. Where was I? That thing, he flies out. He thinks he's doing like this amazing thing. In the air, all the news comes out, this dude's a wife beater.
Yeah.
And Cory Booker's like, thank God I didn't drive to the airport yet.
You know, the funny part is that he's going to El Salvador to tell them that they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then you're going to have to call the White House to get your jailed ass home. That ought to be a fun. I would love to be let me answer the phones that night. Hello? Oh, I'll have to put you on hold. Yeah. That's the problem with dumb people.
Yeah.
No, seriously. It's like they're dumb, and we know they're dumb. But the problem is they don't know they're dumb because they're dumb.
Yes. Well, and by the way, speaking of that lack of intelligence, they're playing in Trump's lane here, right? I mean, this issue, by far, is his strongest issue. All the polling shows us that, right? It was the foundational pillar of his election last November. Why do they continue to play in his lane, right, where he's strongest? Which just shows you how
Well, it goes back to, and I've been on this conspiracy thing about why they're so upset about Doge, and I think this guy falls into it. As the corruption for the last 4 years, there was a shadow group running the government. There was a small percentage that kept picking things that didn't make sense to us. There were 20% on everything because that's where the embezzlement comes from and the money comes from. I think they're trying to make an example out of him. So when it comes to them, when we see congressmen being arrested for embezzlement, they're going to say, "Oh, they're deporting us. They're taking us like they did. They're disappearing." Yeah. No, you got a warrant, bruh.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But again, it goes back to my first point. Dumb.
Yeah, I resent the way the media is trying to force feed you their priorities. It's not even their priority. They don't care about this guy either. But they're basically pushing this so hard on you to push all your other concerns out. What about this guy? Forget about the victims of crime. Forget about the fact that downtown we had a young woman just knifed with a broken bottle. That's not your concern. It's this guy, this gang member. And that drives me crazy.
Who has a great gang member lawyer, by the way.
Yes.
Again, dumb.
Ooh, gangbanger lawyer. That sounds like a great show.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.